Barclay. Just like the
All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for coming to our third Thursdays at the JKC Gallery. I am Michael Chovan-Dalton, the director of the gallery. And well, most of you already know that. So I'm going to just hand it on over to Heather and Habib. And this is, of course, where I become technical operator.
Behind the scenes.
All right.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming out tonight. Happy St. Patrick's Day. And we are really excited about today's show. Habib and I have each chosen a good friend of ours. So we've got two friends nearby us, both Jeff and Gene. Jeff will be going first tonight. He has been a friend of mine and a huge inspiration for years. I'm super excited to have him here to talk to you about his pinhole photography. He has a bunch of goodies. I don't know if you can tell. He's got some goodies to show off tonight. I think you're really going to love his work. Even though I'm familiar with his work, every time I see something new from him, my mind is just blown. So if there's anyone, home at Zoom or in the audience that has never seen his work before, I think you're really going to love it. Why don't you tell us about Gene?
All right, to the right, I have my man,
Lean into the mic.
All right, sorry about that, guys. To my right, I have my man, Gene Barclay, who I actually met in the streets of Trenton, New Jersey back in 2017. We actually connected through BMXing and urban exploring in the beginning, and we've known each other since. Proud to say I know this guy since then. His photography is just elevated. Now he's jumping around the globe and he's here to show some of his work.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Jeff, are you ready?
Yep.
All right, let's do it.
Let's see if the screen share will work.
Yeah, here we go.
We tested it. It should work. You see, I don't remember how to do it.
Perfect.
All right. So, yeah, first of all, it's great to be here. Thanks you guys for turning up in the room with us. It's good to know that there's people out there in different places in the world listening to me. And I will try and show you a little bit of what I do with pinhole cameras in the street. I decided to name this thing Stretching the Decisive Moment because you probably heard of the concept of the decisive moment. There was a famous French photographer and his really important book was called that in English. And he, of course, walked around with a 35mm camera, which takes pictures really quick like this. What we do is a little bit slower when you use no lenses, but you can still sort of catch things. You just have to be crafty about it. So I'll show you some of my experiments in that. But first, I'll jump back. Actually, this is it going to work? Oh, yeah, it does work. You know, when I was a kid, there was this magazine that came to my house every month called National Geographic World. If you're old like me, you might remember it. Maybe they still do it, but it showed you, things to do and things to see. And one month there was a pinhole camera in there. And this was sort of at the time that pinhole photography was sort of coming back in the 70s. But I didn't know that. I was 10 years old, but I cut up the little model, put it together and stuck it on the front of a 126 film cartridge, I think it was, and took some pictures. And a couple years ago, I found just one. And so here's my dad in front of our VW microbus in the shadow of 10-year-old me taking a picture. And I wish I still had the film, but it's just funny to think that, I had this and then I forgot about it for a long time and then it came back. But, fast forward a few years, I managed to not take any photography classes until I was almost out of college. And there, sort of my eyes were opened and I started carrying around a heavy 35mm camera with me, taking pictures in the street, thinking about Robert Frank and people like that. And after a few years of this, rolling my own film in the basement, I ended up in art school in Philly. And there I kept doing the same thing and gradually started to use different tools. And while I was there, what I ended up with was one of these, sort of an old press camera, which is kind of like the updated version of what my dad was using in the 50s. He was a photographer too. But I tried different lenses that weren't meant for that and ended up with pictures like this. So before I found the idea of pinhole photography, this is what I was doing. And I also used to travel a lot. And so one of the things I found in different places around was a photographer named Joseph Sudek. And it turns out that today is Joseph Sudek's birthday. So if he was still here, he would be 126 years old. But that's a nice coincidence. It's not only St. Patrick's Day. But I found this book of his panoramic photographs. He did a lot of other things apart from this, but these really intrigued me. And I thought, oh, maybe I could do that. The camera that he used for this was something that I couldn't find in Philly in the 90s. There was no eBay yet, really, I don't think. But I had a professor there named Martha Madigan, and Martha is a lifelong explorer of alternative photographic things. And she said, well, you might try pinhole. And I really didn't want to do it because I thought you had to run into the darkroom every time you took a picture. But she kind of convinced me because the possibilities are that you can get the big panoramas and you could make your own camera. So then I had to do some math, which wasn't that complicated. And if you want to know about this, ask me later. And I mocked up a camera out of some cardboard and put ortho film in it and went out in the street and tested it. And this seemed to work. So then the next problem was how to make a camera that would be reloadable in daylight. I wanted to use film. So I took an old box Brownie and carved it in half and made this big brick here, which has film in it. I was going to take it out, but that I carried with me the next time I got on a plane. I had a project that I wanted to do, and I took different cameras and photographed like mad and brought this along, which just shows that I don't care too much about what's in my backpack because it's big. But when I got back from the trip, the pictures from the lens camera didn't interest me as much as the pinhole pictures that I managed to pick up along the way. And so I was kind of off. And since then, I've done more pinhole photography than anything else. This was in about maybe the year 2000, something like that. But, as you can see, it's a really wide image and it wasn't very practical. And you can only get 4 pictures on a roll. And also it leaked light like a sieve. I've since done some interior modifications to this thing so it'll work better. But anyway, I needed to do something else. So I changed the format and made different machines. And this is what I ended up with. And so this kind of camera sat on a tripod and I did landscapes and city photographs with it, kind of the same work I've been doing before. This was the last version of it, which I brought. So we can open this up and look at it if you're here later. But anyway, I didn't really show these to anybody. I wasn't trying to get my work out there. I was just making pictures of places that I ended up at. And I thought that even in a scene like this, the fact that the exposure was, 10 seconds, 20 seconds a minute changes what you see enough to make it distinctive. And so, yeah, like I said, I did a lot of these until maybe about 2013 or so, when a couple of things happened. One was social media came along and I started to think, well, surely there's people out there doing this other than just me, and maybe I can find them. And another thing was I kind of got tired of the same rectangular panoramas and let's change this up a bit. So I started making more cameras because back then it wasn't so easy to find them already made. And I just had the make it yourself ethic. But then, people started, zero image was already around, but I got in on the first Kickstarter of Ondu, which I still love. And that camera I won't get rid of. But another person that I found was someone named Todd Schlemmer, who lives out in Washington State. And he designs a lot of things, many of which can be 3D printed, including cameras. And I think this is the third one that I got from him. And here it is. If you're here, we can open this up and look at it later. But the point of getting this machine from Todd was that I wanted to take it out in the street and take pictures there. And so, I wanted a bigger negative than 35 millimeter. So this thing takes 6:9 pictures and it has a shutter on it that a cable release will work, which is good for the camera not moving. Because I had seen another friend of mine named Marcus Kessler. He's a German guy living in Heidelberg. And he had a 4x5 pinhole camera that he just held in his hands and took pictures. And I thought, can you do that? Is it okay? Because I really needed a tripod, and it kind of helped me relax a little bit slowly. But yeah, so this machine, I took it out in the street and started trying to photograph with it. And I kind of liked what I got, but there was a big light leak down every picture. And I was too distracted to do anything about that for a couple of years. And then finally, okay, it's time to fix the camera. Got it all sealed up finally after about the third attempt. And then we had an election. And the election inspired people to go out in the streets and hold signs. And I wanted to be in that. And so I thought, well, okay, the camera's finally fixed. Let's see what I get. And so why is it not moving here? There we go. So I took the camera out and made a lot of photographs at various events mostly in Manhattan, or I went to the Women's March in DC. And I really liked what I got. This was sort of the first test of street photo with a pinhole camera. In order to do that, most pinhole cameras that people use will have an aperture of something like f150 or even higher. And I put a big pinhole on this thing, so the aperture was only f80, and that helped to make the pictures, and also used fast film. And then I decided to print them as Van Dyke Brown prints, because I thought that it would be softer and might, because they're blurry anyway, but the feeling of motion that I found in there interested me a lot. But around about, after I had done a bunch of these, I started to get more interested in what if you try to isolate one figure? And for that, this camera was not appropriate because it's too wide of an angle. And in order to try and get, one person instead of a full wide scene, I needed a longer lens in effect, or sort of a longer camera. And this was what came next. And that's the picture that's on the flyer. And the way I got to these was I had an old Graflex rollback that I had sitting around, which was going to turn into a camera, but I didn't know what yet. It's a 6x7 back, which the film doesn't have numbers on the back, so you need a machine for that. And I found another sort of old point and shoot camera from the 1930s that was about the right size, and I could take the glass out, and just made a box that would connect the housing for the pinhole with the film. And then I needed a pinhole, but if your camera is going to be 300 millimeters from one side to the other, and you put 0.2 millimeter pinhole on there, then the aperture number is going to be 750, and it'll take 7 minutes to get a picture, and then the person in the street will be gone. So I did the math, or used the website to do the math, and got this large 2 millimeter hole, which is a pinhole, and I polished this nail to make the holes. And then I put the whole thing together and took it out and pointed at something that wasn't moving. And you can see there's lines on the camera, which I used to aim it. And at this point, I thought I was going to be using this thing on a tripod. But the results were okay, but you see it's not centered there. And so then I had to make a finder, which wasn't too tricky, using some tests and a paper negatives. And now once I got the finder on it, it's ready to go. And it's sitting here. So for scale, I'll hold it. It's kind of chunky. And I couldn't use a tripod with that in the city. So I just went walking around, and mostly in New York, but not only, and took a lot of pictures of people. And after I had a whole bunch of these things, I thought, well, yeah, I need a name for these things, and what can I call these guys? And I'm a big fan of a great Argentine novelist named Julio Cortázar. And one of his sort of short story books of fables is called Stories of Cronopios and Famas, and Esperanzas too. And the Famas are sort of concerned with their status in the world, but the Cronopios were the ones who kind of, they forgot the money they needed to ride the bus, or they left their lunch on the counter before they went to school, that kind of thing. And this interested me as a type. I sort of identified with them, and I thought maybe these people I find out can be chronopias because they're not real specific. I was hoping to be able to capture sort of the essence of someone, not really, but not be too specific, like they might not recognize themselves. And so you end up feeling more their humanity than worrying about, this person specifically. And these were eventually printed as silver prints, 16 by 20, and a big show was put up where they were all sort of able to look at each other across the room, which also seemed important to me for them to not just exist as solo images in isolation. It was good to have a bunch of them. Oh, and this guy here, when he got across the street, he saw what I was doing. He's like, "What is that thing?" And I told him, and he said, "Oh, that looks like the thing that they used to collect the ghosts in Ghostbusters." And I said, "Thank you. This is exactly what it is." So most people don't mind. Once in a while, someone would dislike being photographed, and then you have a conversation and you just don't use the pictures. So I was happy with this as an experiment, and I did an awful lot of them. And now there's some new ones. But first I'll take a little detour because there's all kinds of ways you can use pinhole photography and pinhole cameras. You can make your own cameras to describe the world almost however you want to see it. But the main thing I think is you sort of are able to manipulate time because your phone camera or your SLR or whatever camera you're used to using will have a shutter speed that's very quick. And with a camera like these that we use, you can have that or you cannot, and you can choose. And this is really great. So one of the other end of the spectrum is something that Heather also does a lot of these. It's called solagraphs. And you take a picture which over some length of time will show you where the sun was and integrated with the landscape. And there's a place in Philadelphia called the Halide Project. And they asked me some time ago to do a workshop there on solagraphs. And so we did that. And now this year I'm going to do it again. So at the end of April, which is the last Sunday in April is always Pinhole Day, we had to invent our own holiday for ourselves. And so on that day this year, I'm going to be in Philly helping people make a whole bunch of sun cameras. So come on down if you're in Philly or you want to come. And then the other thing I'll throw in is that with regard to solagraphs, there's a project I've been doing for a couple of years with a good friend of mine who lives across the ocean. And so Diana and I both will set cameras out in various places and leave them there for a while. And you kind of always hope they're still going to be there when you get back. And if they are, then you take the paper and put it in an envelope and send it. And then the other side will do the same. And as long as the cameras survive, then you sometimes get up with something interesting. So there's Crossworlds, which is a different project. But back to street photo. A while ago, I saw somewhere that I think it was either Indonesia or Malaysia, and I can't remember which. There was someone who was making Instax square pinhole pictures, and they had an exhibition of these. Instax square is kind of Polaroid, if you know. I'll hold it up. They're not that big, but it's a square picture. And I thought, well, I might be interested in that. And I have a friend who is a nut for all sorts of cameras, including Instax. And I was telling her about this, and she's like, well, I have an extra camera here, and maybe you can use it. So Diane, who's in Idaho, she sent me a camera, and it had a lens on it, and it had a pinhole attachment, and it's sort of right here after I, butchered it. But the pinhole was a bit small for my taste, and also the distance from the pinhole to the film was about 8 centimeters, which means kind of a long lens. It's like a 40 millimeter lens. And so I tested it, and it sat there for a couple of years, and then finally the time was right, and I was like, I think I can take this thing apart and change it. So I just hacked the barrel, and now it's about a 4 centimeters, and I put a bigger pinhole on it and took it out in the street. And so this is brand new. These I've done like within the last few weeks, and I really haven't decided what I'm doing with them yet. I'm still editing. I just basically scanned a whole bunch of them for this presentation. But I'm excited about these. Again, I'm lucky that the Instax film media is supposed to be 800 ASA, which means that you can get a picture quickly. And again, I made the pinhole bigger, so the aperture on this thing's about f100. Even so, you need bright sunlight, or the pictures just look like mud. But it's interesting to me to note how they work differently from the other pictures that I've already shown you, because those are much more, tightly focused. The camera only shows, sort of the equivalent of a 150 millimeter lens. This one's more like a 20, which also means that I have to be much closer to the subject. But it's great fun shooting these things, and I hope you like them. I'm just blipping through here because I feel constrained for time. So that's the new project. But basically the reason why, not the reason why I did it, because I guess I can't help myself, but the end goal for these immediately was supposed to be something called Pavlovka Pinhole Fest. And Pavlovka Pinhole Fest is probably in its 6th or 7th year in Kyiv, Ukraine. And I was lucky enough to be there a couple of years ago. And so here we are, a bunch of us standing outside the museum there. All the gallery events happened outside, ostensibly because of the coronavirus. And fortunately, I'm in touch with most of the people in this picture, and they're all doing okay. I would imagine they're probably not watching me now, but they don't like the war. I don't like the war. I don't want the war. And not only that, but they're all part of a community which extends into Russia and Belarus. There's something called the Union of Pinholists, which sort of originated in St. Petersburg and has active members in Belarus and in Ukraine and a couple of other places. And none of these people like the war. It's disrupting all of their lives. And I can't go through a day without thinking about this. So I can't sort of sit here and blithely tell about my street photo without talking about them. But the fact that, we're still in touch, and the fact that we can all cross these borders and make all this artwork just gives me hope. And so I'd rather keep a hopeful view that this mess will be over soon, and we can all get on with making stuff and paying attention, which is what photography can be about. And I'll pass the mic to Gene, and thanks for your attention. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
And that was amazing. You always inspire me with your work. And I've got ideas.
Put a whole new light to her pinhole cameras.
Mad scientist.
We're gonna turn Gene into a
Mhm.
pinhole
You can
photographer
make
by the end of the night.
Am I still sharing your?
Yes, you are.
All right, give me one.
I'll give you the little head nod or
Okay,
whatever
good.
works.
All right. All right. Let me get some things out of the way here. Okay. You just give me a beep.
Sounds good. What's up, y'all? I'm Gene. Nice to see everyone. A lot of beautiful faces out here. Real quick, before I get started, this is a moment. Y'all mind if I take a photo? Here, we gotta get y'all in there too. We gotta get the audience. You gotta document everything, But yeah, my name's Gene. I've been shooting photography since I was 2 years old when my mom gave me a camera. And somehow in a weird, twisted, crazy way, here we are. So here's my story.
Oh,
You can go to the
okay.
next one. So that's my mom and my grandmother. As I said, when I was 2 years old, I started shooting photography. Wasn't really my decision. My mom kind of wanted to see my perspective on the world and see how I saw everything. So she gave me a little auto jammy, a little point and shoot. And from there, didn't really think much, just started clicking, like just click, 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 click. I don't know, it was pretty cool. As I said, I didn't really think much. It's just, I had things. So I shot photos of my friends when we were in the snow, afterwards, the hot chocolate, goofing off, doing all that good stuff. Shot photos of my family, very typical American pizza and beer night. I kind of like these photos though, because a lot of them have the perspective as a young kid, so everything's pointing up. Shot photo, so my family, once again, I really like this image. It's actually of my cousin. He's a tattoo artist now. So to look back and see him not all covered in ink, it's pretty funny now looking back on it. My neighbors, my pets, and the adventures that we would go on. So from here, as I said, I really wasn't thinking much. I was a little kid, just kind of had a camera, a little auto jammy, just click, 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 just kind of just seeing the world and documenting things. It was kind of cool, just like, oh, click, there's a photo, like, that's pretty cool. This one's a little blurry, didn't really like that. Did that for many, many years until I got into late elementary school, where I got involved with BMX. And if any of you guys know anything about action sports, BMX, Jackass, Viva La Bam, any of that stuff, half of it is, hey, point the camera at me. I might do something cool. I might land on my head. So that's exactly what we did. And there's me actually doing a backflip. And it was one of those things that just still never really thought much of it. But I kind of got a little bit more into it, started learning how to use a camera. And I would take photos at the skate park of my friends, just every day. Just as I said, it was one of those things I never really put thought into. It was just, you might land on your head, so I want to film this. That would be a good clip or a good photo. So as I got more involved with BMX, I started documenting professionals, adventures, all sorts of everything, from going riding in the streets, exploring different cities, exploring the world around me. It was kind of I didn't realize it at the time, but using my camera and using my bike, it was my access and my key to the world. I've been able to go to neighborhoods and places all over that I would have no other excuse to go there if it weren't for BMX and photography. Same deal here, just as I kept getting older, it just flowed with me. I didn't really have much thought about it. It was just, this was my thing. I just kind of had the camera on deck, ready to go. Just if something was about to happen, pulled it out or gave it to a friend because I was going to do something stupid. So as I got older and time started passing, people outside of BMX started noticing my work and inviting me to shoot portraits of them, documenting concerts, this, that, and the third. And once again, not just BMX related, but with the camera, all these doors started opening. So that's go back one more. So that's actually one of local artists here in the city, Rel Gambino. He was one of the first people that I shot, actually got paid for it. And then from there, different graffiti kids started reaching out saying, hey, come with me. I got this building. I want to hang off the side of it. And for me, it was all just one massive adventure, just getting out, exploring the world. As I said before, never really any thought went into it. It was just kind of my opening to the world. Once again, just different graffiti kids just kept reaching out saying, hey, I do this. I need someone to document it. And then from there, we went on and graffiti, hip hop, everything started colliding. And I met these group of German punks that live in West Philly who build these freak bikes and travel the whole country via freight train. And it was just, all of this was never really any thought going into it. It was all just, y'all are doing cool stuff. I want to be a part of this. I just want to go on the adventure. And even the women started showing me some love for it because I grew up in the Instagram era. Everyone wants to be a model nowadays. Uh-oh.
Oh, I keep getting this reconnecting thing.
Yes.
Probably it. I'm gonna reload. Let's see.
There we go.
Was that it? Is that
Yes,
the right one?
that was the right
Excellent.
one.
All right.
So as I said, even though I never really put thought into it, it was like all of a sudden, one day I became a professional photographer off of a Hangout tip. never any thought of just people like, hey, I'll give you some money, few bucks. And me being a high school kid, like $100, that's a whole summer's worth of money right there. I'm good. Like, cool, I'll gladly shoot your photo. So then you get a little bit older and you get to this patch in my life. Wasn't too hot. Was feeling pretty rough, didn't really know what to do, trying to follow the status quo of going to school, getting a job, all that type of stuff. And to be honest with you, that wasn't really my thing. It led me some trouble, kind of into some rough times, and it got to a point where I got into trouble with the law. I remember getting out of the holding cell the next morning in a real low spot, drinking a bunch, waking up the next morning, super hungover and kind of hit rock bottom at this point. And I started going through all these photos that I shot. And I was going through them and looking back on all these different memories throughout my life, things that were gone, the people that were gone. And basically I had all these life memories and things that have changed and evolved. It's all been documented. And I was able to go back that day and see all the different friends and the things, how they've passed. And it got to a point that after looking through these photos for hours and hours that day, that it kind of clicked, where it was, whoa, I'm not only leaving a piece of myself behind when I click that shutter button, but all of my subjects, I had a piece of them. And I had a story of all these people. And not only that, I also realized, yes, I was going on adventures, but it was my key to the world. So some time passes and I start shooting BMX more. Got real involved with BMX, and that was my only mindset. I just wanted to go out, pick a random neighborhood in Philadelphia and just explore everything. And I had this mindset that I had to document everything. And it just, everywhere I went, it was just click, 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 click. And it wasn't just a click, look at it, oh, that's a cool photo. It was almost like a sense of importance that I had of, not only am I leaving a piece of myself behind, it was a piece of everyone else. So that being said, being a young and dumb 19-year-old, I hear of this event called Swamp Fest. And at this point, I had just moved into my first apartment. And this month I had enough money for rent or enough money to go to Swamp Fest. So what I do, called up my landlord and said, I'm out. So that's me actually at south of the border. If any of you guys have been there, it's a pretty wild place. And I was on for the next adventure of just super passionate to just shoot photos and document life and the people around me. So that's what I did. I got down to Florida and documented Swamp Fest. And to say the least, it's basically like the Woodstock of BMX. People get a few beers in them, start pedaling fast, and hope for the best. That was the whole motto of this whole event. And as you can see with this photo, it was that encapsulated perfectly. Those are all pallets that ramp is made out of, and just simple nails, and people would hit it and the whole thing would shake. And
There's no engineers out there either. Like,
oh, no engineers.
Did they make it all the way around?
Some people didn't. But at the end of the day, I was there to capture it. And I shot all these photos and have been able to network, and I don't want to say market because that was never really my thought. It was kind of just, I have this tool that's so important to document because this may never happen again. So after that weekend, all of my friends went home. And I remember sitting at a Wawa in the middle of Florida, just being like, oh crap, I don't have any home. I have nowhere to go. And I'm stuck here. I got my car. But to my luck, after talking to some friends down there, I actually got invited to go and document the more professional side of BMX, where I got to document the first ever qualifying events for the Olympics. And looking back on these images now, is kind of a cool feeling, seeing how everything played out, and that this past summer the Olympics had BMX in it for the first time. So it was, go back a few
sorry.
slides. One more. So I basically had this opportunity and the knowledge that even though I had a lot of uncertainty in my life, my message and what I was doing, it had to be documented. And that even though BMX is a great community, there wasn't a whole lot of photographers there to say, hey, this is how this athlete started from just showing up to a contest at the local skate park all the way to the next. So we went to the next event, and I basically did that for a few months, just kind of bopping around, sleeping on friends' couches, until I landed in Greenville, North Carolina, home of East Carolina University. And from there, I guess you can say it was the happily ever after, where I kind of got to a point where I can put food on my table, pay rent, put a little bit of money to savings, and things got really good from there. And it was cool to see how my mindset of not only a piece of me is being left behind, but a piece of everyone else is being left behind. And to be able to take that mindset and actually manifest it into something where people respected it was a cool feeling. You can go one more. So as I said, that was kind of my little story. But as you see, everyone has heard here, a photo says a million words. So I figured I'd tell some stories about more recent photos that I've shot. This was a photo I took down in Puerto Rico. I went down there kind of on a whim, didn't really know anything about Puerto Rico or what was down there, but I got a round trip flight for $75. So I packed up my bags and had a hammock and said, here we go, let's do this. So I go there, and the only thing I really knew about Puerto Rico is that there was this bowl right on the beach that was like right on a cliff, and I was like, we're gonna go ride it, this is gonna be awesome, great adventure. Ended up showing up and not being able to ride it. But I went to this amazing neighborhood called La Perla, which if you look it up on Google, everyone there tells you don't go there. It's the roughest area. And I ended up finding it was one of the most beautiful days like I've ever had. Just the people were so friendly. I was welcomed into homes. The beer was cold. Just great times. So I get home and my dad calls me up and says, hey, like, how was the trip? I'm like, this is awesome. I went to La Perla. It was a great adventure, this and that. And he's like, oh, cool. Just as an FYI, your grandfather shot photography for the military about 75 years ago. I'm like, oh, that's cool. Like, I'll go look at some of the old photos. And that's the first photo that I saw, was the same neighborhood that I spent most of my time in, which was really a cool feeling, but also a part of me was like, dang, like, I thought I had went somewhere else where no one had gone, but I've been beat by 75 years. So this is another project that I worked on last year. This is Jamal and Michelle. They run a community refrigerator in Philadelphia called Mama T's. And the story behind this is really cool because they started off of nothing more than inspiration of the bread lines back in the 1920s when the Depression hit, and they just wanted to help out. And their only motto was, leave what you can, take what you need. So they started getting this growing and growing. And in the background, if you look, it's a construction site. They had actually just gotten a grant from Whole Foods the week before to open up a whole community grocery store to help out and give free food to all the underprivileged people in Philadelphia. It was cool to be able to document them and hearing their story. And now they finally received some success with this whole project. All right, Irregular, my man. So as I said, I got into graffiti when I was pretty young. Just kind of never really wrote graffiti, but it was one of those things I just love seeing it on the wall. Like even now, if I see a Jersey barrier and just I see tags on it, I'm just hooked. Like every little thing, I just have to look. But this one kid in particular, Irregular,
Oh, sorry.
he it's just everywhere in the city in Philadelphia. And a lot of times what stuck out was he would actually put a mirror on the eye. So when you look into the eye, you're kind of looking at yourself. So always kind of real fascinated with him. And just one day I'm going to the store, look down at my phone to just send a text or whatever I was doing. And I look up and this kid's writing it on the wall. I'm like, hold on a second. I've seen you. My name's Gene. What's up? And yeah, it was a cool photo to just kind of see this face and this word that I'd see all over the city, and they just popped up out of nowhere. So it's just kind of one of those like, yo, let me get a flickaroony real quick. Just got a little
no face.
No face. So yeah, it was a cool feeling to kind of put a face and a human to the tag that I saw everywhere. This photo was this was a wild one. I'll be honest with you. I was hanging out at the skate park one day at 9th and Poplar, and there's train tracks above, so it's not uncommon to hear like the engine roar as like people hauled ass down the road, and never really thought much of it when I heard this one car coming, but then I heard a crash. Sure enough, it was a police officer. He gets out. Apparently the guy had a little bit too much to drink. Gets out stumbling. We're looking at him like, well, you're the person we call for this situation. And he's looking at us like, weren't supposed to see that. So it was one of those, it's a cool photo to look back on, and it was definitely a wild day to see that unfold firsthand. Now this photo, I like this one because this dog, he runs shit. I was super inspired by Bruce Gilden at the time. And if you don't know who that is, his whole thing is getting out with a 35mm lens and a flash and getting real up close. And I wish there was more of a backstory. Just I was super inspired with Bruce Gilden, and seeing the dog kind of poke its head out is a cool one. It definitely encapsulates a huge part of my life, because I actually did a whole book on just photos like these. And it was an interesting time to see and document complete random strangers, and not only get so close, but also try and build enough trust in the 1/100th of a second that the shutter goes off to be able to document them and shoot that photo. So it was a cool experiment. And if any of you guys like shooting photography, definitely try it once. It'll put you out of your comfort zone and will force you into situations that you will never expect to be in, but definitely worth it. Still kind of the same deal with the Bruce Gilden inspiration. This photo I really like because these are the mummers, and I've always known about them. I've known that they existed, but I never really knew what they were about. And this past year, I wake up on New Year's Day, didn't really know what to do. And I hear cheering and screaming and this and that. I'm like, what in the world is going on? So I look out my window, and sure enough, I'm on the parade route right for the mummers. So I go outside and couldn't help myself and just click, 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 just really documented everything. And it was a cool piece of little history because, as I said before, I never really knew much about them. So to hear the stories and hear, oh, my grandfather was a mummer, and then now I'm a part of it, and now my son and my grandkids are all part of it. It was cool to hear the stories and the document this generation of what has been evolving and growing for probably 100 years, I'd say. And then this one's my most recent trip. This was a bucket list trip for sure. I've always heard of Barcelona, Spain. Really had no excuse to go out there, but the whole city is a giant skate park. And as a BMX rider, is one, oh, you gotta go there, gotta go there. Never really got the opportunity until actually less than a week ago I got back. But a friend of mine opened up a bike shop. So as soon as I heard that, it was just popping up. Gotta get a plane ticket, pop on over there. Now, at this point, I asked at the beginning, what is the weight of a photograph? And to be honest with you, that weight, it changes and it grows and evolves just like all of us do. Where we are today and the photographs that we take today aren't the same photographs they will be in 10, 20 years. And in my mind, the main view and the main purpose of photography is simply just to document. And you never know what's going to be of interest 10 plus years from now. So if I can give you any recommendation, just document your friends, document your families, document the places that you're going. Because one day, trust me, you'll be thankful that you can look back and say, wow, look how much I've grown. Or for both good and bad, you can see photos of, man, that was a crappy day. Or you can look at photos and say, man, this was a really good day. And I'm glad I have these memories documented. But the weight really changes and evolves as time goes. And it's a really powerful tool. And to be able to take a great photo, whether it's pinhole camera or just a little Canon 35 millimeter, to be able to take a great photo is a great honor, and everything should be documented. Everyone has a story to tell, so why not be the person to tell that story? So once again, thank you for having me. Thank you, Habib and Heather. JKC Gallery. Seriously, thank you.
Thank you. That's inspiring.
Very inspiring. You've been dropping gems all day. Like me and him been hanging out for the last 2 hours, been around shooting, and the knowledge he's just dropping. I'm like, damn, dude, like you've been here before. Like just the stuff that he's saying, man. Thank you again, Jeff. Thank you also. Heather, anything you want to add? Like this is an awesome show.
No, I think we should dive into the comments. Do we have, oh, sorry. Were there any questions in the?
Oh, can you guys wave your hands over there?
Show's over, we
Thank
out.
you. What timing? You knew exactly. That's right. Let's see. Were there questions? I don't
I think
see
we,
any.
for the first time ever in over 2 years, I think we forgot to mention to rate
Oh, to put
questions.
yeah,
in the
because we got a late
comments.
start, so I forgot to say, well, go ahead and start typing in your questions now. And we'll take questions from the audience here, the live studio audience. If you all want to, I'll repeat your question if you have any. But yeah, anyone has any questions? Let's see them. Let's hear them. We may not. Who knows?
All right, Chris.
Yeah.
You kind of answered it, Jeff, but typically when people do street photography, it's either I'm going to take a small rangefinder, like a discrete a TLOR, so nobody really knows what I'm doing. They can't remember that that's a camera. And you're holding a bazooka. Like, was there more than one person that came wondering across the street asking you about
A lot of people asked, and most of them were kind of amused. I mean, this is kind of what I usually get. And I really, like, I have one friend who just insists you must ask them first. And actually, I was out with this thing a couple of weeks ago, and a guy didn't like it. And I ended up giving him the picture because I was like, you know what, let's just not. And he knew about photography because I said, well, I'm not sure which one it is. He says, well, it's not the one, it's the one that's not cooked yet. And I was like, you know what we're doing here. But no, my favorite was like, because again, it's big, right? And it was the first time I took it out in New York, and I was on Houston Street, just, waiting for my friends to do whatever they were doing and just testing it, really. I don't think I was shooting, I guess. But these two women came across the street, and one of them just, latched onto me. She really started lecturing me, and she said, you can't do that. And of course, I know what the legal situation is. It's totally okay to shoot in the street, but at the same time, you don't want to be obnoxious, right? You don't want to offend people. And so usually I just, if anyone approaches me and says they don't like it, I was like, well, I'm terribly sorry. Didn't mean to bother you. And I just won't use it. And usually I won't, because, you look at your film and you know what was what. But this woman, she really got wound up, and she said, I'm going to tell the police on you. And I was like, yeah, okay. And she walked away. And it was right there where they have these booths of people selling T-shirts and stuff. And then this kid who was working one of the booths came over. He said, she called the cops on you. And I was like, oh, yeah. What did she tell him? And she told him I was pointing a gun around. And I said, and he described what I was wearing. So I took off my hat and put my jacket on. It's like, no, but no, I mean, most people aren't like that. And I really think a lot has to do, like I'm such a complete introvert, like I was a bookworm kid who never wanted to talk to anyone. And I guess it sort of changed over the years somehow, but it just takes being open to people, I think, because it's like, I remember what Habib said when we were here, and I came to your presentation, and he was talking about dealing with people who might be frightening in the street. And I used to shoot on the street in North Philly in abandoned neighborhoods, and people there, one time these guys came up to me and they were hanging around the abandoned project, and they said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm just looking around." And I said, "Do you think anybody's got a problem with it?" And they said, "Well, if they do, they'll take your camera." So I was lucky maybe through the years to not have any real serious problems. Sometimes people don't like it, but I think it depends on our attitude as photographers too,
I'm want to throw that question to you also. We were literally just
I
having
was
this
just thinking
conversation. So yeah.
And so this is about, in case you didn't hear the original question, this is about the presence, your presence, being seen with the big camera or the little camera or whatever in this case, and then permission, right?
Yes.
In a more street
Mhm.
photography style, right?
So my opinion, I think that all photography has its place, but what's comfortable with me is honestly, I'd rather my subject know that I'm taking a photo. In a weird way, when I shoot a photo and I have like a big long lens and someone's way across the street, I feel like in that sense, I'm almost stealing it from them because they have no idea I'm shooting the photo of them, compared to getting up and just, if you're right there, they know that their photo was taken, and you can't help but hide it. Some people might give you some rough for it, but most people are just kind of curious. And if you're honest and you're truthful and you know your mission, people can kind of read off of that. Obviously, every once in a while, you're going to get those crazies that just want to cause an issue no matter what, but you can't really help that. It's always going to be there. And I say the biggest thing is just being street smart, just being able to judge, hey, I need to ask this person for permission versus they're in an organic moment. You can just go in and click it. It's all kind of just reading the room and seeing what's right. But my biggest thing is just make sure they know that you're taking the photo, because it's, I don't know, in my opinion, it's a little weird and stalkerish if you're like across the street and you have a big long lens and they have no idea.
But you mentioned Bruce Gilden, who has come under fire for the way he represents people in his photographs, right?
Well, I think that that's a part of, I mean, that's the great argument. It's what's the difference between creating art and subjecting someone to a look that isn't really the best? And I think that each photographer needs to have their own viewpoints. And as I said, if you're honest and truthful to who you are and your mission, most people are going to be okay with it. And from at least my experiences, people are excited that you even notice them. A lot of the people, especially Bruce Gilden, will look for the wildest people who aren't photographed every day. We're looking for the people that have all sorts of crazy malfunctions, and you can look at them, and there's been times I've shown photos back to the people on digital especially, and they've said, wow, I'm beautiful. And to be able to have that interaction with them, even though they have teeth missing and this and that, it's, if you show them respect, you get respect back. And as I said, it's the biggest thing is just being able to read the room and saying, hey, this one right here is not worth it. It's not worth my life to snap this photo.
I'll second that too, because I'm walking in the street with all these cameras, and you're going to be walking down the street, you're going to see people, and you're going to be tempted or you're not, you're going to be interested or not, you're going to see their reaction. And then to what you were saying and what Chris was saying about, using a Rolleiflex, maybe it's like, not everybody's going to know what that is. Like my favorite story, like who was it? Berenice Abbott was known for using a right angle finder back in the 30s because nobody knew what she was doing. But we don't have that luxury anymore. Everyone knows we're being photographed at all times. Fortunately, cell phone cameras have made it easier than it might have been 20 years ago, I would say, because people are sort of more ready to pose for it than they might have been at a different time. But you know, so much is about free conscious communication with that person as you're moving through. And sometimes you just feel like, no, you know, and I've walked by good photographs that I thought could have been made because it didn't feel right. And so that I think you get from doing it too.
Yeah.
You know?
The biggest thing is just getting out and putting yourself out there and risking that negative interaction. But most of the time, I've only had a handful of people that really had issues with it. And you just say, you know what, I'm sorry. Nothing really I can do about it. I'll delete the image.
We're coming
don't
up at
delete the
7:30. Those of
image.
you who have to go, thank you very much for joining us as always. You know, keep an eye on jkcgallery.online for future events. But I'm gonna ask a question from Juho. Jeff, could you tell more about Crossworlds?
Crossworlds. Everyone wants to know about Crossworlds. Well, so yeah, to divert from street photo, yeah, I've been doing solographs for a while now. I sort of found that because of someone named Jesus Hogelar who lives in Barcelona, actually, and a couple other friends of mine who got me into doing that. And then, you know, there's Diana Pankova, who is at this point in Denmark, and I knew through Facebook Photo World, and you know, she also was making solographs through her own circle, the Pinholists guys, and a good friend of ours in Minsk named Bertrand, who might be there. And so we were both in an exhibition in Germany, which was one of the ones put together by Marcus Kessler in Heidelberg. And while we were there, we were all sitting around, and you know, I think I brought sun cameras with me. I don't really remember, but you know, she had the idea. She was like, well, what if we exchange these things? And so I think, yeah, you know what, that year I was going from Heidelberg straight to Oaxaca, because in Oaxaca, Mexico, there's a fantastic gang of pinhole people who throw a big fest every year, and you should all immediately book flights to Oaxaca for a pinhole day, because it's
Starts in
great.
2 weeks.
Yeah, really? Yeah, it's a pinhole week that lasts more than a month now.
Wow.
So we should all go. And anyway, so I made sun camera pictures in Heidelberg, took the cameras with me in the airplane down to Mexico and exposed them there. That was kind of the beginning of it. But yeah, there's not much to tell. It's just, you know, we just keep making more. You're a solar guy too, and you know how it is. Once you start having a bunch of these cameras, then you close the door, and when you open the door again, they've multiplied, and then you have to go out and put them up, and it's just yeah, I think you're one of us, so you understand it.
I love the pinhole community. You guys are like a gang. You guys are really.
They do. They show up in
like,
numbers.
They show up in numbers. They support
They're in
each
the
other.
audience.
I love it. Like man, I love the pinhole community.
Mhm.
I think we're such a niche like group of people that when you meet another pinhole photographer, you're like,
Yeah.
we're best friends now.
There's unicorns floating around out here.
Yes. Unicorns. That's your thing.
I love
It
it.
wasn't me, it's
Totally
Carlos
author.
Jurado in Mexico. He's a professor and pinhole practitioner, educator, who recently died maybe a year or two ago. I can remember. It's time gets funny, but yeah, he spread pinhole photography throughout the Spanish-speaking world and is well revered. I just saw a couple people posted a magazine all about him the other day, which I was going to download and haven't done yet. Of course, I
Send
didn't
me the
learn
link.
Spanish yet either, so that's kind of
Google
the problem.
Translate.
Yes. Mhm.
Other questions from our live audience? Not that you're not alive on Zoom.
On live.
That's right.
I got one for Gene, sort of. I guess there's like kind of a big difference between like, you know, actually like shooting BMX is like you really have to understand what everybody's doing versus like you know, just sort of the street photography. So do you have like two mindsets or
It's one of those things.
well hold on.
So could you rephrase the question? Let everybody know what the question was. Yeah.
So basically, it's one of those things that in my mind, there is not a second mindset. I kind of grew up with a camera just ready to go type of deal. But one of the biggest things with shooting BMX is understanding the sport and knowing how a trick should look. There are certain ways where it's like, if you snap it just a second too early, it looks a little bit off compared to if you snap it a second later, it's like that style that they want to capture and document. So I think it's all the same. It's just a photo is a photo. It doesn't really matter.
But in your
Process.
approach,
Yeah, the approach doesn't really matter, but it's the biggest thing is knowing the sport, whether it's BMX, skateboarding, knowing that spot in the trick where it looks good to fully tell like what they are doing.
Because I know that was like, when the Olympics were happening, that was like, there were a lot of people who were not skate and BMX photographers shooting it, and there were some rough.
the idea being that they might be sports photographers, but it maybe not familiar with that
Yeah.
sport, right?
And I'd honestly recommend everyone to shoot it because, to be honest with you, it's BMX and skateboarding, things happen on the drop of a dime so fast that it will help all your other photography just to be able to just get that and be quick and get that moment. But as I said, the biggest thing is knowing the sport and knowing what looks good and how a trick should be done, and compared to like getting maybe the highest air, but like the way that they're dipped down too, and like all that type of stuff.
Or just shoot continuous shutter. It's been a lot of time going through post-production, but I totally understand. I just want to ask something with that real quick too, because that's honestly how we met. He was a couple blocks down BMXing. I had my camera. I used to BMX at one point in time, and he said, I don't have my camera on me, and we connected like that. But as a street photographer, I feel like it just becomes repetitive as far as you know what you're looking for. When you see that, you kind of just, it's just like off the instance. It's like just a feeling that you get.
Yeah.
Also, so I just want to add to that also, because I like to shoot action sports also, just anything I can. But yeah, I feel you.
Just when I went read anything on Zoom because it's not my job, and suddenly became relevant to what you said. Someone actually asked you, Gene, if you do shoot multiple pictures for a full shutter, or do one print for the best.
So
So it just became relevant to what you said.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was just fucking around when I said that, but
no, seriously,
Good
it's
question.
one of those, it's like, how do you know? Like every image, and whether it's street photography, BMX, or pinhole, the strategy and the approach to it is going to change and adapt for that situation. Most of the time, I just want to get one photo. I've kind of been around it enough that I know exactly when that point in the trick is going to happen. But then there's other times, like I like doing a lot of stop motion photos where I'll just hold the shutter down and you can combine them all together. But as I said, every photo, it's just different tools, and you're going to use those tools to the best of your abilities to capture what's happening in front of you. One thing that I do like doing a lot is actually grabbing a flash and slowing the shutter speed down a lot, where you can capture the motion and make that super clear, but you can also get the drag and the motion of the trick as someone's going across the camera and all that good stuff.
I knew we could make him a pinhole photographer. You want motion. You
I might need a lesson after this.
You could get days of motion.
That's why we're gonna get you and I let go of it.
I knew it.
I've been grabbed.
Do you all want to close this out then?
Yeah, this is awesome. This is a really great show. Thank you both for being here, and thank you
you.
everyone online and in person for being here as well.
Definitely. Thank you for everyone that came. This is our first show. We had 2 artists in person in a long time.
Yeah,
High five, partner.
yeah.
I'll give you a high five too.
You too. I got you.
I can't reach, but
Air high fives over there to everybody virtually also.
Yes, that's great.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. Do you guys have
yeah.
any future projects that you have coming? You working on anything like that before we close out? You want to mention? Or you just out here in the streets? You guys outside just shooting.
hopefully book in the works with all the travels I've been doing recently,
Okay.
but definitely support me. I'm broke. Buy a print.
There you go. You,
Oh,
sir?
me, I'm just shooting. I'm just shooting and I want the war to end. Thank you.
Yes, you're here.
Peace. Peace.
Awesome.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. And we'll see you again. And
Yeah, actually, it's
yes.
Let's get
so
to it.
Eddie is online, our artist, one of our artists for next month. I had to look at the date, April 21st. We'll see you guys. So
Oh.
Eddie and Krista, yeah, April 21st.
All right.
Awesome. So
Thanks
see you guys
again.
then.
Good night, everyone.
Have a
night.
good night,
night.
guys.